Corv and Hase Lord Hayes. This is the quiet retreat of the German Christians. My pronunciation will not be exact on some of these words, but I'll do my best. It began, as such things often do, not with shouting, but with yearning. After the humiliation of the First World War and the chaos that followed, Germany was aching for unity, dignity, and divine order. Many Christians, pastors, choirs, and ordinary pew sitters felt that God had abandoned their nation, or that they had abandoned him. Into that hunger stepped a new promise, a national renewal clothed in religious language, and a man who spoke of destiny as if heaven itself were his sponsor. By 1932, a faction calling itself the Deutsche Christen, the German Christians, was rising within the Protestant churches. They saw themselves as the handmaids of a purified faith, one that would cast off the weakness of liberalism and the foreign elements of the Old Testament. They said they were building a muscular Christianity, one that could stand beside the new Reich and not be ashamed by it. Their sermons grew louder as the streets filled with brown uniforms. They spoke of a Führer sent by Providence. They hung swastikas beside crosses. They spoke of positive Christianity, a vague creed that replaced mercy with bloodline, spirit with soil. In some churches, the altar bore both the cross of Christ and the emblem of the Reich. Many saw no contradiction. It was, they said, all for God and Germany. The movement was not a fringe. It became a torrent. By 1933, after Hitler's rise to power, the German Christians helped install their chosen man, Ludwig Müller, as Reichsbischof, the state bishop of a unified, Nazified Protestant church. The dream of a single German church under one earthly shepherd had come true. From the pulpits came readings that celebrated racial purity. From the lips of pastors came denouncements of non-Aryan believers. The gospel was edited, then hollowed out, and through it all, countless parishioners nodded in reverent agreement, grateful to see their country restored. Yet, not everyone bowed. From within the same faith rose the Bekennende Kirche, the confessing church, a gathering of pastors and theologians who refused to merge the cross and the swastika. They signed the Barmen Declaration, declaring that no earthly Führer could ever replace Christ as head of the church. Their leaders, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Martin Niemöller, were arrested, silenced, or executed. But their resistance was small, and the great machinery of conformity rolled on. The Sunday bells still rang, the pews still filled. To the outside world, the churches of Germany looked alive. Then came the war, and then came the silence. When the Reich fell, the world's eyes turned toward those who had preached its gospel. Many expected public repentance, mass confession, the cleansing of the pulpits. There were some brave, some broken, who stood and said, "We were wrong." But the great body of believers did not. The German Christians melted away into the fog of ordinary life. Some were quietly defrocked, others simply retired. Many more stayed in their parishes, changing nothing but the tone of their sermons. Denazification came, on paper, in committees, but it soon gave way to exhaustion and the Cold War. The need for stability outweighed the hunger for truth. The same hands that once raised the Hitler salute now lifted communion chalices. The same voices that had blessed the Reich now spoke of peace, of rebuilding, of forgiveness. The official church issued the Stuttgart Declaration of Guilt in 1945, admitting our infinite debt of guilt. Yet, the confession felt partial, abstract, without faces or names. And so the retreat began. It was not a procession to a mountain cloister, not a collective exile in the woods. It was quieter and more ordinary. It was the retreat into everyday life, the silent slipping back into the familiar rhythms of Sunday services and family dinners, the subtle shifting of language so that yesterday's certainties became today's regrets, unspoken but understood. The banners were taken down. The sermons changed their emphasis. Children asked questions their parents could not answer. In the countryside, an old pastor might still wear the same robe, his hair whiter, his eyes heavier. When he prayed for forgiveness, he did not always say what for. And the congregations, too, prayed for mercy without naming their sin. The silence itself became the penance. Historians would later call it a quiet reintegration. But beneath that quiet was something more human. Shame mixed with the ache of recognition. For some, the war had stripped away the illusion that evil always looks evil. They had discovered that it can look like good order, like patriotism, like the clean harmony of a hymn sung too loudly. Over the decades, younger theologians began to unearth the old archives and ask harder questions. They read the pamphlets, the edited Bibles, the speeches that turned Christ into a tribal god. And they wrote the histories that the earlier generation could not bear to face. Some churches held services of remembrance. Some restored the Jewish names erased from their rolls. Some built small monuments, simple stones that said, "We remember." And yet, the truest monument is quieter still. The unending struggle of conscience to stay awake when comfort calls for slumber. The story of the German Christians is not only a chapter of German history, it is a mirror for every believer, every nation, every generation. It shows how faith can be captured by fear, how the search for belonging can become the surrender of the soul. But it also shows how, even after betrayal, faith can purify itself, not by shouting its innocence, but by whispering its repentance and living differently thereafter. There is a saying among the survivors of that age: God was silent, but not absent. In the ruins, amid the hollowed-out churches and the ash of cities, a few returned to that silence and found that it had not forsaken them. The silence was waiting, as it always had, for the honest heart to speak again. And so the story ends, not in condemnation, but in an invitation to watch our own altars, our own hearts, and the flags we hang beside our symbols of love. Because the great error of those quiet Christians was not their faith, but their forgetting that Christ needs no nation to be great, and that no empire, however splendid, can serve two masters. In time, many of them found peace, not through denial, but through the long labor of truth. Their retreat became repentance. Their repentance became learning, and their learning became the quiet vow of the new German church: never again to confuse the voice of power with the voice of God. History does not really repeat. It echoes.